big realization that hit him on the back of the head. Let's give a hand for Eric Pitzer as he gives his fifth speech out of the Confident Communication Manual.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters. I don't think we have any guests. So have you ever learned something instantly? Maybe you tried turning the key in your ignition when your engine was already on. That would teach you something pretty quick. Or like woken up the day after, maybe 2 or 3 beers too many the night before. You learned something really quick doing that. I'd like to tell you a story about when I instantly learned something. And this occurred the summer of 2004. This was the summer after my sophomore year of college. And I was traveling through Europe. I had just studied abroad. And I found myself in a very, very, very small town right on the border between France and Spain while I was traveling between Barcelona, Spain and Paris, France on a train. So I was waiting in a train station while the sun was coming down. It was getting very, very dark. And there were literally maybe 8 people in this train station. Very beautiful building, very small. Really nobody in this town, very, very desolate. Not the kind of place you would want to have a soiree. And I was waiting for my train. My train arrived, and I walk onto my train. It was a night train between this tiny, tiny town to Paris. And the only 2 other people who got on the train with me were 2 Middle Eastern gentlemen, and they carried one piece of luggage. It was about this big, and the other gentleman carried a plastic bag. This was 3 years after the September 11th attacks, and only about 4 months after the train bombings that took place in Madrid. They killed almost 200 people and wounded almost 2,000 people. So these 2 gentlemen, Middle Eastern gentlemen, very, very casually dressed, sit down basically exactly next to me. The gentleman who carried the plastic bag sat in front of me, and the gentleman with the suitcase that was this big sat across the aisle from me. Nobody else got on the train. Immediately my mind started running. I started thinking about possibilities. I started thinking about how great, from their perspective or from a terrorist perspective, it would be to blow up a train that was going between Spain and France. And so I thought to myself, what am I going to do? Do I do nothing and just hope that everything's going to be okay? Or do I try to do something about this? And so I looked through all my papers. I tried to run through ideas of things that I could do. And I looked at my train ticket. And I saw that the guy in the Barcelona train station charged me 10 euros too much for my ticket. I was wondering why he asked me to pay him in cash only, and I realized that was probably it. So I thought, man, I've got a way to start a conversation here. So I kind of leaned up to the guy in front of me and I said, "Excuse me, did you buy your ticket at the train station in Barcelona?" And he kind of looked up at me and I looked back, and he seemed really distraught. He had his hands on his head like this a lot. And I didn't know, maybe he didn't understand in English, so I asked him in Spanish. I said, "Excuse me, did you buy your ticket in the train station?" And immediately when I said this, the gentleman across the aisle slid over into my seat. He said, No, don't talk to my friend. He doesn't speak English. You can talk to me. So I thought, oh man. This is at least an opportunity. I can start talking to this guy and see what he's here for. So immediately we start having a conversation, and I start asking him why he's traveling, where he's traveling from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we talk some more. I try to pose as the innocent young traveler, and I pull out my travel book, and he was actually posing very, very nicely. He was showing me areas in Paris. He was from Paris, showing me places to go, showing me where the train was going to drop me off. Very, very nice. But I still kept asking him question after question after question. Why are you traveling? Who's this person that you're with? And I think he got the impression that I was really trying to find out some information about him. And it got to the point where he got very, very quiet. And he said, "I'm going to go back to my seat now." And he went back over to his seat, and I thought, oh man, my chance is shot. I'll never know what's going to happen. So I'm still running through my mind, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? And I realized, I said, Eric, the chances of this train actually blowing up are so small. Don't even worry about it. Just focus on the good. It's not going to happen. So I rested my head back and closed my eyes, and I tried to fall asleep. I very well may have fallen asleep, but I was woken up by the lights flicking on in this train. Bright, bright lights, and the sound of a French police officer coming through, saying something. I had no idea what he was saying, but I immediately stood up, and just like you would in any place when you're traveling, you pull out your passport. And this gentleman in a uniform walked up. He had a gun on his hip. He comes directly to me. He looks at my passport, maybe glances at it, asks me to sit down. He pulls the other two gentlemen, has them stand up. And I remember looking over the seat at the guy in front of me and his passport, and it had Arabic writing on it, of course. And immediately when this police officer looked at these two gentlemen and looked at their passports, he got really big eyes, and he seemed to be on guard. He asked them to step forward. He patted them both down. He went through their luggage. The gentleman in front of me in his plastic bag had cigarettes. The gentleman across the aisle from me in his suitcase, this big, had clothes, maybe some socks, maybe a trinket or two. When the police officer was done, he asked them both to sit down, and he walked out, turned the lights off. And I thought, oh, well, I guess I know what was in that suitcase now. And so I closed my eyes, and I went back to sleep. And I woke up the next morning in Paris. The whole train was full of people. We arrived, everybody got up, everybody started walking out. And I remember vividly walking out behind the gentleman who sat across from me and looking at the back of his head as we wove through the crowd in the Paris train station. Needless to say, I learned a lot that morning. Mr. Toastmaster.